I was 5 years into a relationship I thought was headed for forever. There were signs, of course. Every liar leaves behind a scent if you're willing to sniff past the roses. But love has a way of dulling your senses, especially when you think you've already found your person. His name was Damon, 6 foot something, with eyes like a storm and a smile he rationed like gold. He was that perfect mix of charming and withdrawn, the kind of man who made you feel special just for being let in. We met at a New Year's Eve party in Brooklyn. He was in a tux, I was in borrowed heels. He asked for my name right as the clock hit midnight, and I swear to God, I thought that was fate. We moved in together after a year. A little apartment in Park Slope filled with thrifted bookshelves, secondhand furniture, and a cat we never agreed on. He traveled often, consulting gigs in Miami, Austin, sometimes LA, and I got used to the silence he left behind. I filled it with my job at the publishing house, with wine nights and writing short stories I never finished. He always came back with gifts, little things. A bracelet from some airport shop, a scarf that smelled like another woman's perfume, but I chalked it up to the stewardess leaning over too close. The proposal came quietly, no grand gesture, just a simple ring over breakfast on a rainy Saturday. I said yes like an idiot, and then I waited. Waited for a date. Waited for the talk about venues, about colors, guest lists, registries. He said he didn't want to rush. Said work was too crazy. Said we were already like married anyway. Wasn't that enough? It wasn't. The unraveling started with a photo. My friend Jess sent it to me late one night, a blurry Instagram story from someone she followed. It showed a rehearsal dinner, captioned, "Tomorrow's the big day." And right there, in the background, was Damon, arm around a woman I'd never seen before, grinning in a way he hadn't grinned with me in months. I stared at it for 20 minutes. Then I opened his travel calendar, the one he shared with me through Google. Sure enough, he was consulting in Charleston that weekend. Jess's voice cracked when she asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, but I wasn't. Because Damon, my Damon, was getting married that weekend. To someone who wasn't me, and I was about to crash the wedding. It's funny how heartbreak doesn't feel like shattering. It feels more like a slow freezing, like someone poured ice water into your veins. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream. I didn't even touch the bottle of Merlot I usually reached for when Damon was away. I just stared at the screen, blinking at the grainy photo like it might somehow rearrange itself into a less devastating truth. But it didn't, and in that stillness, something in me sharpened. The next morning, I called Jess. "I need a dress," I said, flat and steady. She didn't ask questions. She knew me well enough to understand when my voice got that quiet, it meant something was breaking or about to break. Jess worked in events, knew a lot of people in the wedding scene. I asked if she could find out where the venue was. I expected a challenge. Instead, she said, "Already on it." By noon, she had a name, Magnolia Vineyards, a rustic estate 2 hours outside Charleston. Very trendy, very expensive, very Damon. He always talked about wanting something natural but elevated, when we used to daydream about our own wedding. I guess he just cut me out of the dream. I booked a last-minute flight, packed a weekend bag with my most understated, devastating black dress, and borrowed a pair of Jess's heels that made me feel like revenge had a designer label. And then I did something that would make any therapist cringe. I called an ex. His name was Ryder, a musician I dated years ago who, despite being the emotional equivalent of a fire escape, was still somehow on good terms with me. He lived in Charleston now. We hadn't spoken in ages, but when I told him I needed a favor, he didn't hesitate. "Crash a wedding?" he said, his voice laced with curiosity and amusement. "Sounds like the most fun I've had in years." I told him he'd be my +1, told him to wear something that looked expensive and slightly dangerous, told him not to ask too many questions until after. He laughed. "You always did throw the best disasters." We met at the venue an hour before the ceremony. He looked good, better than I remembered, but it wasn't about him. It wasn't even about Damon anymore. It was about the woman in the white dress who had no idea her groom had been living a double life. We walked in like we belonged. No one questioned us. Ryder had brought an old invitation from some other wedding at the same place. and flashed it at the entrance like it was a VIP pass. I kept my head high, lips red, expression unreadable. And then I saw him, Damon, standing under a string of white lights, laughing with groomsmen, adjusting his tie, not a flicker of guilt on his face, not a single trace of me in his eyes. I gripped Ryder's arm and whispered through clenched teeth, "Let's give him something to remember." There's a strange kind of power in being invisible in plain sight. No one noticed me. Not at first. I was just another guest. Just another well-dressed woman sipping from a glass of champagne and smiling politely. But inside, I was shaking. Not with sadness, with fury. The kind that simmers so quietly it almost looks like grace. We slipped into the crowd during cocktail hour. Ryder played his part, perfectly laughing, a little too loudly, placing a protective hand on the small of my back, looking at me. It was all performance, all smoke, but it worked. We were the perfect mystery couple, familiar enough to belong, unknown enough to go unquestioned. I scanned the crowd, looking for her, the bride. Her name was Mara, I'd learned, no last name yet. Damon hadn't even given me that much. Just a first name, Jess, found in a tagged post from the rehearsal dinner. I imagined her being beautiful, elegant, some East Coast debutante with a trust fund and a taste for liars. But when I finally spotted her across the lawn, I froze. She wasn't what I expected. She was soft, earnest, laughing with her bridesmaids in a way that didn't seem rehearsed or performative. She looked young, not in age, but in belief, like she still trusted the world, like she still believed Damon was who he pretended to be. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, almost. Then I remembered the nights I stayed up waiting for his calls from business trips. The anniversaries he forgot, the promises he whispered in my ear, knowing full well he was planning to give them to someone else. I looked away before I could feel too much. A hand brushed my arm. "Ryder, you sure you want to do this?" he asked, low enough that only I could hear. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because right then, Damon turned. He saw me, and for the first time in 5 years, the man who always had the upper hand, who always controlled the story, looked genuinely afraid. He didn't move, just stared. And I smiled. Not the kind of smile you give a man you love. The kind you give a man who finally realizes he's not the only one who knows the game is up. Ryder leaned in, played his role to perfection. "Kiss me," I said quietly, and he did, right there in front of Damon. Slow, possessive. The kind of kiss that makes people look twice and wonder how long you've been in love. When I opened my eyes, Damon was gone. Retreated into the mansion. Coward. I downed the rest of my champagne and handed Ryder my glass. "Let's go inside," I said. Because I didn't come here just to be seen. I came to ruin him. The mansion was a fairy tale trap, polished wood floors, antique chandeliers, and walls lined with family portraits. It was the kind of venue that screamed old money and curated happiness. Perfect for a man like Damon. I moved through the crowd like I belonged there. Ryder beside me, tall and unbothered, made us look like the kind of couple everyone wants to be. A few guests nodded at us. One older woman even leaned in and whispered, "You two are stunning together. Mara knows how to pick her friends." Friends. I nearly laughed. We passed the guestbook table. There it was, a leather-bound journal with gold-foiled pages, and a sign that read, "Leave your wishes for the happy couple." I stopped, pulled the pen from its stand. Wrote in clear, steady script, "Wishing you all the joy deception can buy. The woman he proposed to before you." Ryder's brows lifted when he read it, but he didn't say a word, just smirked like a man enjoying the prelude to chaos. Then I saw Damon again, this time near the bar, his face pale and drawn, eyes darting toward me like I might scream. But I didn't. I walked up to him, slow and confident, as if we were old friends bumping into each other at a fundraiser. "Damon," I said, my voice light. What a surprise. His mouth opened, then closed. For a man who always had the right thing to say, he suddenly looked like he'd forgotten how to speak. "What are you doing here?" he whispered, stepping closer. "I could ask you the same," I replied, my smile like a knife dipped in sugar. I didn't realize business trips included tuxedos and vows. He ran a hand through his hair, that same nervous tick he had whenever he got caught lying about something small. Like the time he said he was at the gym but came home smelling like bourbon and regret. This isn't what you think, isn't it? I cut in, tilting my head. Because I think you proposed to me, stalled for 2 years, and then secretly planned a wedding with someone else. And I think you didn't expect me to show up. He went quiet, his jaw tightened, then he said the most Damon thing possible, you shouldn't be here. I laughed, actually laughed, loud enough for a few guests to glance over. Oh, sweetheart, I said, stepping even closer. I had to be here. Wouldn't have missed it for the world. Then I turned, left him standing there in a panic spiral. But I wasn't done, because the ceremony hadn't started yet. And I had a speech to give. We made our way to the ceremony area just as the music started, gentle strings over murmured voices. Guests were settling in, smiling, fanning themselves with printed programs that read, The Wedding of Damon Pierce and Mara Elise Hart. Seeing it in print made something inside me twist. Damon Pierce, my Damon. Marrying someone else while the imprint of my life was still on his pillow. Ryder and I slid into seats near the back. He gave my hand a soft squeeze, a silent, "Are you sure?" I nodded. A hush fell as the officiant took his place under the floral arch, the kind of hush that feels sacred, like everyone's holding their breath. And then the music changed, the bridal march. Mara appeared at the end of the aisle, radiant in soft lace, bouquet trembling in her grip. Everyone stood. Phones were lifted. Sniffles rose from somewhere in the second row. I didn't stand. I sat perfectly still, eyes locked on Damon. He stood under the arch like a man who had forgotten how to breathe. His eyes kept flicking back toward the crowd, toward me. He looked like he was hoping I'd vanish, but I wasn't going anywhere, not until the lie he built crumbled in front of everyone who believed in it. The ceremony began. The officiant welcomed everyone, spoke about love, about commitment, about the sacred bond of marriage. All while Damon kept stealing glances, his jaw tight, sweat beginning to bead along his hairline. Then came the vows. Mara went first. Her voice was trembling but sincere. She talked about the moment she met Damon on a flight to Chicago, how he made her feel safe. My stomach turned. He used the same lines on me, word for word. When it was Damon's turn, he hesitated, took a long breath, and I smiled again. That was when Ryder stood up. He didn't say anything at first, just straightened his jacket. Everyone turned. The officiant blinked. "Sir, I'm sorry," Ryder said, voice calm and clear. "But before this man makes promises in front of God and everyone else here, there's something you all deserve to know." Gasps, murmurs. Damon took one step forward. "Don't," he hissed. But Ryder turned toward the guests. "This man," he said, motioning to Damon, "is already engaged. To another woman, who's sitting right there." And then all eyes were on me. I stood slowly, let the silence settle like a fog. "I was his fiancé," I said, voice even. 5 years together, lived with him, waited for him, trusted him, until 3 nights ago, I found out he was marrying someone else. Mara's face went pale. The bouquet slipped from her hands. And the fairy tale, it shattered. For one breathtaking second, the world just stopped. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Mara stood frozen under that delicate floral arch, her mouth slightly open, mascara trembling at the edges of her lashes. Her bridesmaids exchanged stunned glances, unsure whether to move, to comfort, or to disappear entirely. The guests, their heads swiveling between Damon, Mara, and me, looked like an audience that suddenly realized they were watching a different play. Damon stepped forward, his voice low and frantic. "Mara, I can explain." She held up a hand, and just like that, he stopped speaking. "Mara," I said, softening my tone, "I didn't come to hurt you. I came because I couldn't let you walk into this blind. You don't deserve that. Neither did I." She blinked fast. Her throat moved like she was swallowing broken glass. "You're engaged to him?" "I was. He proposed 2 years ago. Kept delaying the wedding. Said he was waiting for the right time. Turns out the right time was with someone else." Damon's voice cracked, then, his carefully curated mask beginning to splinter. "It wasn't like that. You don't understand. Things with her were complicated." My laugh was bitter. "Complicated? You bought me a ring and then planned a whole wedding behind my back." He turned to Mara, desperate now. You were different. With you, I felt, I don't know, free. Mara stared at him like he'd become something she didn't recognize. Free, she repeated, hollow. Free from what? Responsibility? Truth? Loyalty? I didn't mean to hurt anyone, he said, but no one believed him. Mara slowly stepped down from the arch platform, her dress dragging like a wave behind her. Her eyes met mine. There was pain there, yes, but also understanding. Sisterhood, maybe, that quiet connection women form when they realize they've been betrayed. She walked past Damon like he didn't exist. Her bridesmaids followed her, confused and stunned, their heels crunching on gravel like thunder. The officiant stood frozen, holding a closed book in shaking hands. Damon turned to me. I loved you, he said. And for a moment I saw it. The boyish charm, the wounded eyes, the desperate reach for something real. I shook my head. No, Damon, you loved the way I loved you. You loved the mirror. But the second it stopped flattering you, you looked for another one. And with that, I turned. Ryder was already waiting for me by the exit. He offered me his arm without a word. I took it. As we walked away from the ruins of Damon's perfect day, I heard someone clap. Just once, then another, and another, until applause rose behind us. Not celebration, not mockery, just quiet recognition of a woman who refused to stay silent, of truth crashing the party. We didn't speak until we were back in Ryder's car, the soft slam of the passenger door closing the chapter behind me. The silence between us was warm, almost reverent, like he understood I needed a moment to sit in what had just happened. Outside the windshield, the vineyard blurred past golden rows of grapes, soft sun filtering through the trees. I exhaled slowly. I thought it would feel better, I said. Ryder glanced at me, one hand on the wheel, the other resting gently on the gear shift. It will, he said. Just not yet. I stared out the window. I didn't do it to hurt her. I know. She looked so shocked, like I'd just pulled the floor out from under her. She was standing on a lie, Ryder said quietly. You just showed her where the trapdoor was. I didn't cry. I expected to. Somewhere inside me, I thought I'd finally break down once it was over, but instead, I just felt clean. Raw, maybe, but clean. Like rinsing out a wound with salt water. It stings, but you know it's necessary. We drove in silence for a while, heading back toward Charleston. I leaned my head against the window. Do you think she'll still marry him? No, Ryder said without hesitation. You ripped the veil off. No one marries a man after seeing the monster underneath the tux. I wanted to believe that. I really did. When we reached Charleston, Ryder pulled into a little cafe near the waterfront and insisted I eat. I hadn't realized how empty I felt until the smell of bread and fresh coffee hit me. We sat at a corner table, tucked away from the noise, and he ordered for both of us. Like he used to back when we dated, back when I thought unpredictability was the same as passion. So what now? He asked gently, stirring his coffee. I shrugged. Go home. Start over, I guess. He gave me a look. No. I mean really, what now? You didn't just crash a wedding. You told the truth. That means something. To her, to you. I looked at him. Really looked at the way his eyes didn't flinch, the way he wasn't afraid of the mess I'd become. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen without being studied. I don't know, I said, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I can finally ask myself that question without lying. Ryder raised his coffee in a mock toast. To ugly truths, he said. I raised mine in return, to beautiful endings. And as we drank in silence, I realized something. It wasn't just Damon's wedding that got ruined that day. It was the version of me that needed him to be whole. I went back to New York the next day. The apartment still smelled like him, his cologne lingering on a jacket he left behind, half a bottle of whiskey on the shelf he never restocked, books we'd read aloud to each other, now silent on the nightstand. But I didn't cry. Instead, I pulled out 2 suitcases and started packing, not because I was leaving, but because I wanted everything that belonged to him gone. I folded each shirt without flinching, dumped his toiletries into a grocery bag, and boxed up the framed photos. I didn't burn anything, didn't shred the letters or smash the coffee mug he always used. That would have been letting his absence control me. No, I packed him up neatly, like you would a failed experiment, labeled, contained, done. I had the locks changed by sundown. The only thing I kept was the engagement ring, not as a memento, but because I had other plans for that ring. That night, Jess came over. She brought Thai food and a bottle of mezcal and sat on my floor like we were 23 again. "You did it," she said softly. "You actually did it." "Yeah," I replied, staring at the ring box on the table. "But it didn't undo anything." "No," she agreed, "but it made it visible. That's more than most women get." She reached into her bag and pulled out her laptop. "You ready for the next part?" I blinked. "What part?" She turned the screen toward me. There, open and waiting, was a blank WordPress blog titled The Other Fiancé. "You wanted to stay quiet for 5 years," she said. "But now you get to tell your story." I stared at the screen. I hadn't thought about writing, not seriously. Damon had always said I was too emotional when I drafted essays. But maybe that was exactly what the world needed more of. Grievances that got heard. I typed one sentence. I didn't find out I wasn't the bride until 2 nights before the wedding. Then I kept going, for hours. By midnight, I had 5 full posts drafted, each one cutting deeper, clearer, angrier than the last. Not cruel, but honest. I didn't name names, didn't need to. I just told the truth, my truth. 3 weeks later, the blog hit 100,000 shares. By month 2, I had a podcast deal and a literary agent. Turns out, a lot of women had been almost brides, almost chosen, almost loved, but not anymore. We were done being silent. As for Damon, I never saw him again. Jess heard he left the city. Mara didn't return his calls. She emailed me once, just once. All it said was, "Thank you for giving me a way out." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I filed them under a folder I titled Closure. Because revenge, real revenge, doesn't come when they fall. It comes when you rise. 6 months later, I walked into a bookstore in Soho and saw my name on a table near the entrance. The Other Fiancé, clean white cover. Just a title that somehow said everything. A staff pick. A handwritten note below it said, "For every woman who mistook silence for strength." I stood there for a moment, staring at it like it might vanish if I blinked. A woman next to me picked it up, flipped to the back. I wanted to tell her I'd written it for her, but I didn't. I just smiled, stepped back into the crowd, and let the moment wash over me. The book was doing well, more than well. The podcast had launched 3 weeks earlier and shot to the top of the charts within days. Women from everywhere were writing and sending voice notes, emails, sometimes even handwritten letters. Some were angry, some were broken, some were finding their voices for the first time. And I read every single one. I didn't respond to all of them, but I held them. And in holding them, I healed something in myself too. Jess became my unofficial manager. She was relentless fielding press, coordinating interviews. She'd always said I was meant for something bigger than hiding behind a man's shadow. I just didn't believe her until the shadow was gone. Ryder? He stayed in Charleston. We talked sometimes. He even came up to New York for the launch party. Wore that same smirk, same leather jacket, same gleam in his eye, like he knew what I'd become before I ever did. But we weren't a love story. He was a turning point, a good one. The love story, that was mine. Me, falling in love with the version of myself that didn't flinch when telling the truth. That didn't dim to be digestible. That didn't mistake being chosen for being valued. One night, months after the book tour ended, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, bigger, quieter, filled with books and soft rugs and windows that caught every ounce of sun. And I watched the city hum beneath me. Lights flickered like the world was blinking awake. My phone buzzed. An email from a publisher. Film rights inquiry. I smiled, not because I wanted revenge anymore, but because the girl who once waited by the window for a liar to come home had become the woman other women now looked to for courage. And that's when I whispered it softly, just to myself. Thank you for surviving long enough to become someone worth fighting for.